So hi everyone. We're recording the film today because I forgot to hit record. Shirley and I were doing Sashiko and Naikan introduction a few nights ago, and we had an amazing experience. It was lovely, really soothing, a real gentle way of ending the day. And I learned so much, not only about Sashiko, but also about um, a mindfulness through Shirley and through the way that she stitches. So it was a lovely experience, and I was so kind of taken back by, or just in the flow of what we were doing, that halfway through I realized my job was to write, was to do record. I had it on my laptop and I forgot. So Shirley and I thought, rather than give you a half lesson in Sashiko, that we would just repeat this and just take 30 minutes or so to do that. So I'm just going to hand over to Shirley for her to introduce herself. So Shirley, give us a lowdown.
Here we go. So we'll do it like we did the other night. So here we go. So I'm Shirley McLaughlin, and I'm a designer, an educator, and a researcher. And all these roles have always been about sustainable design. So as a designer, I design modern day family heirlooms by hand stitching. So I sort of stitch stories and I stitch memories for clients. And I work with wool and I work with cotton, sort of natural materials. And then as an educator, I teach, I lecture at Edinburgh University in the textile department and on the environmental design course. And again, it's exchanging knowledge and continuing this investigation of sustainable design. And then finally, as a researcher, I do practice-based research, which means I do things in order to write about them. And I've presented research papers at various international conferences, and I've been part of Fashion Revolution since 2015. So I'll hand over to Karen, and she can give you a little bit of background about what she does, and then we'll start.
I love that. I love your story, Shirley. There's so many different parts to what you've done, and to stitch stories and stitch memories is amazing. Um, my background is in positive psychology and coaching psychology. I just finished my master's at the beginning of this year, and that's why I was attracted to the workshop on Sashiko, because there seemed to be a meditative aspect to that. And also a pal of mine, he's finishing his master's in Naikan, and I thought that sounded like a really interesting slant on mindfulness. And I've been learning about mindfulness. I'm starting a mindfulness course on Monday, this Monday coming. Um, so I'm teaching mindfulness. So I thought, if I actually learned a bit about Naikan, if I had the discipline of having to learn for the workshop this week, that would be good as well. So that's just a wee bit of background to me. And surely this is the best bit, when we start to learn about Sashiko. So as you can see, Shirley's put the camera onto her work, and I'm just going to hide myself view and allow you to focus on Shirley.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so we've sort of set this up with the idea, because the idea Karen and I both had when we started this was we kind of figured people might have had enough, be a little bit zoomed out. So the idea is that I'll show you some stitches. This is Sashiko embroidery here. I'll show you how to do some of it. We'll start, and when we did the class, we got everybody sort of stitching quite early on, and then what we'll do is I'll talk you through it, and then I'll just stitch, and Karen will talk to me. So I'd say this is a workshop that's inspired by Sashiko stitching, and there's two sort of thoughts here, and one would be the visible mending, which I'll show you, and then there's this whole beautiful embroidery and stitching that you can do with Sashiko, which I'll show you how to do that. In the time we've got, we won't be able to go into it, but I'll give you some tips and show you how to do it. And there's sort of a few little tools that you'll need. And just to sort of briefly, the Sashiko is the stitches, the little stabs, the little stitches, and you probably heard quite a little bit about boro. And boro is actually the little rag, is the material traditionally that you would have sewn on top of to do the repair. So quite simply, the technique is simply doing lots of little running stitches to help to strengthen or to embellish a garment or a repair. And traditionally it's blue and white. So I'm going to try and stick to that a little bit, although the first sample isn't, but just to kind of show you what it's about. So this was the little repair that I started, just to kind of show you. Because we're sort of part of Fashion Revolution, we figured it was quite nice to sort of, sort of talk about repair and how to repair clothes, and so we sort of keep them a bit longer, and we don't throw things away so much. So this is really simple. The little simple repair that I'll show you is just this little running stitch, and this would be the tacking thread that you put on first, and you'd put it on the back, so you cover the repair, and then you just simply start to stitch in little rows. As you go, you'll see also I've got a little thimble here, this little Sashiko thimble, which is in the back of my hand, and I use that to push. So you just go in and out, and you sort of feed the material through as you go. I'm going through 2 layers at once here, so it's quite tough. So that's why you need to give it a little push with this needle. We used to have thimbles on our fingers, but that doesn't work so much. This is a really nice it's a nice action to have. So you can see I just start to do this little stitch and running up, and then I feel a wee bit, this is my Blue Peter moment. So then I have another little one, and this is when I've done a little bit more. So you actually do cover the whole repair in these little stitches. And again, it's just that little action, and they call it a little rocking action actually. And the more you do it, the better you get. And that's kind of part of this whole sort of philosophy of hand stitching, which I really like. And just this whole idea that this is done by hand, so it's not perfect, okay? And we had this sort of discussion about, if we wanted it to be perfect, then, you could use a sewing machine. But that's not what this is. So this is just a little nod to like Japanese wabi sabi, which is that lovely, just that embracing imperfection, which this absolutely is, because it's certainly not perfect, but it's actually quite a beautiful thing as you do it. So that's kind of what we would like to sort of do if you wanted to do a repair, and you would cover the whole square, and then you would take away the tack. And then actually what's quite interesting, I've done this quite often for my husband's jeans and things, and because he's in and out the pockets and all the time, I tend to cut away the corners and I round it off, and that makes the repair almost just embeds itself in the other bit of material, and you can trim right down to the edge, that sort of idea. But what you can sort of see is both sides actually are really quite lovely. The stitched and the back are, because you've just done that rocking movement, that running stitch. So that's the sort of real basis of a simple repair. But what all you actually need tool wise is perhaps, the thimble is useful. It's not completely necessary. There's a few little other tools that you could have. I mean, you can have the little needles, little Sashiko needles. But I actually prefer, I've got another one that I've got needles all over here, I'll show you as we go on. I quite like a beading needle, because it's a longer one, so you get quite a nice little movement going there. You can make it as technical as you want, and you can use the actual Sashiko thread, which is sort of here, and you'll see it's quite thick. Mm-hmm. Traditionally, you would do it double, because again, it's just that whole idea that we're showing the repair, like we're saying, I value this garment or this piece of work enough to want to show you that I'm going to repair it. But quite often you can buy this on the internet and things, but quite often I've actually just been using what I've got, and I use embroidery thread. And again, it's pretty similar, but sometimes I split it. The idea is you would sew with something quite similar to what the repair is. Whoops, sorry. So what I would also do, what we talk about is just this stitching is part of unshin, they call it, which is just the practicing of the stitching. And I meant to say when we did it the other night, we mentioned that you take the stitcher's oath sort of thing, which actually just means that you promise to be patient and not to judge your work too harshly. Because this, for some of you, is the first time you've done it, and that's fine. And for others, you might want to really hone your stitching and go on and do things more seriously and for longer. But for tonight, we're just showing you how you can start. So there's lots of little things you can get, and this is a little stencil that you can get, and these are easily got. And this would be one of the traditional Japanese patterns, the little Sashiko pattern. And a lot of their patterns all mean sort of little things which you can talk about a wee bit later. And literally, to get this pattern onto your material, you can just use, you get this little, really simple little embroidery transfer paper, which some of you have got. Or if you don't have that, you can actually just literally use a little embroidery pencil, which is just here. And you just want to mark this onto your fabric, okay? And again, then you would follow it. And so again, I'd sort of prepared another little one earlier. And you're always going in a direction, and then you're sort of turning the material a lot of the time. So you can see the direction I started off this way, doing all this one side. Then I turn it, and then I give it a wee push. And then you just literally go down the other side. And again, it's simply that in and out, and you sort of push the material in. You're sort of feeding the material. And you can sort of see your stitches are very similar in size. Again, it's not perfect, and the idea was that the stitches should be the size of a grain of rice, which is quite a nice little guide, and it's also very in keeping with the white on blue material. So again, you would go all the way back down that side, and I'd carry it all the way down here, all the way down that side, and then you turn and go again. And then, as I said earlier, this was one I did just to show you how beautiful I think it is. And that's literally, I did it in this colour because I just had that colour thread and I quite liked it. But you can see how you would just go down, 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 and then you would turn and go round the other side. And I'm actually sort of thinking now I might go back in and stitch a little bit more, but I think that's a beautiful pattern. Mm. And equally, this is the kind of engineered, this is the technical side of Sashiko. And this is another little bit that I absolutely love, which is, I'll just put these little tapes on because the other night all my threads got all mixed up. So what you can do, and I'll show you how to do that. Maybe I mentioned the transfer paper. If you want to start working with the grids, which is what you would do for more complex, if you want to keep it really engineered and really tight, you would have these grids, and then just really simply with that paper, the tracing paper, you would trace it on a grid. So this is what I originally did for this one. I traced a little grid, and I did all my little stitches. I followed the little grid all the way down this way, and then the most delightful little thing happens, and everybody really enjoys this, and I just really love doing this. You just go back in and back out the other side, and you'll start to just, it's like magic really, you'll be amazed. You get these really lovely little jolly crosses, they just happen, you know. And it's like I amaze myself when I do this because I think, gosh, that looks really that looks like I've measured, and I have got a little grid, but do you know what I mean? You can just see this lovely little pattern just happens. It just happens. And again, as from a repair point of view, it really is pretty sound. And again, you can see this is by no way perfect, but I know exactly where I'm going and how I'm going with that one. So I might come back and stitch that one as Karen and I start talking. And it was just to show you that how you can do, you can do the running stitch where you follow it. So you can see if you follow it, these little lines, they just happen. They just happen, But if you chose not to follow it, what you can do also is, we call it offset running stitch, and so then it's like little bricks, it's like a little brick repeat. So you go in between the stitches, and I'll be stitching that one as we talk as well. It's a lovely one to do. And then I was sort of thinking, I'm actually not very good at following rules and following patterns. So I thought it might be quite nice to show some of you, if you really didn't want to follow anything, you can still really enjoy Sashiko repair, because you can just make your own, let the needle just go for its little wander itself. And as long as you're feeding it in and out, and you're going quite close, that will act as a really good repair. Equally, if you want to make it more of an embellished Sashiko, then you can just make your own pattern happen. And again, I think there's something really lovely when you do something again and again, and you do more and more of it. It becomes something much bigger. And I'll go back and I can do that one when we're talking. And also, I just thought this was a really lovely little pattern to do as well. And these are little rice flowers. And again, with this technique, you never go back into the middle. So you always come in and you go out. And you come close to the middle, but you don't actually go into the middle. And at the end, I'll sort of show you a wee bit of my own embroidery where I've kind of been inspired by Sashiko, but not directly. So you go in and out, and again, it's that turn. So I would turn my material, and then you go back in and back out the other side. And that gives you a kind of, you could leave it at that, and that could just be a cross. But equally, it just feels like it's empty to me, so I want to just go back in, and then I'm going back across, and I'm back out the other side. And all of these things are all about the flow. It's about things flowing, and it actually starts to feel really lovely to do. So again, you can make this as random as you want, but the fact that they're little stabs, little stitches, it really does strengthen the material. So that's a really lovely one to do. That's very random. You can put that anywhere you want, just very randomly. And then just to kind of finish before we start stitching and talking, these are the ones that are a little bit more formal, if you like. But again, they feel really nice to do. And that's just working with this grid again that we spoke of. You draw the grid on, and you go in and out, and it's the same. This is quite a nice. This is a lovely one to do because it becomes this magical pattern that you just start to do. But I think what I'm trying to say is that they're all very, very simple to do, and it's all just based on just this rhythm of stitch. And so that was a little grid that we can go back to, and that just shows you the stitch that I was showing you a little moment ago. I was doing it randomly. And it's not far away from this one, but again, with this little one, I'll show you. You can see, if you were working with the grid, you can see how you would go from each side in, and then you would go back out, but you just turn the material. So that's my little nod to Sashiko stitch. And so now I'd like to hear from Karen about Naikan mindfulness, please, and I'll carry on stitching.
Well, I just think that there is a philosophy of Sashiko. What do you think? You know, the wisdom that you impart as you're talking. For instance, the the little stitches that strengthen the material. You know, you
Yeah,
can get so much from that it doesn't have to be a big stitch.
no.
It's just a small stitch and lots of them. The collective, the power of the collective is really interesting. And
It's like that thing, isn't it, as well? Like, I think we have sayings like a stitch in time, don't we? We have a stitch in time saves nine. I
yeah,
think with this, it's these little repairs, and I think quite often also I've not. Sometimes it's not to wait till the garment's actually got a hole. If you can feel it, it's under the arm, or it's on a cuff, or it's round. It's different areas that are going to start to wear. I've done that with some of my shirts. I've started to stitch in before that happens. And it is just that, yeah, those little stitches. You do a
yeah,
little thing and it becomes a bigger repair.
yeah. And yeah, I remember when you were talking on Wednesday, uh, you described those crosses that you showed us just now as
Oh,
delightful
yeah.
crosses.
They're just
And
lovely, aren't they?
they are. And
You feel, just feel it, like I think this is the other thing I think we were talking about the other night was it feels really lovely to do, and so it
Mhm,
doesn't, it is a repair, and I think we had that conversation the other night about this whole, there is a sort of a stigma with wearing repaired clothes, for
yeah,
example, but whereas, and I think also traditionally doing the repair was a difficult thing to do. it wasn't enjoyable. But I think if you work with, then these are nice materials. Like this is like linen. It's all offcuts of linen from samples that I do. You know, I
Mm.
was saying I work with Colops here, and they're like a local micro manufacturer. So when they work with the designers, they give the designer back the material, so that it's the designer's responsibility to use everything. And I've always kind of done that in my practice anyway.
Mhm.
But it feels lovely. Like this doesn't feel like a bad job to do. It feels like a nice thing to do.
Yeah.
And, and I think, I don't know, I just think for me there's something really magical that happens when I do this. You know, I just feel, I think it's just lovely. I think it's beautiful, you know.
Go and tell me the magical. What's that?
What is the magical?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just, I think it's just that maybe it's a little bit of prep, you know, you prep it, there's a little bit of prep because, you know, maybe they're doing the running stitches, you
Uh-huh.
do a little bit of prep, and then you can't go wrong now. I can't actually go wrong now, you know. I mean, I could make the crosses might not be quite perfect, but I don't think there's anything, you know, they're just these lovely little things that are just appearing. They're just
Mm.
like magically appearing.
Mm. And I guess what you were saying at the beginning about the wabi sabi, the actual embracing of imperfection, is quite strange for us culturally now, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because we've been living in a culture where you buy new. You don't embrace imperfection. You should have everything new. And if it's not perfect, then it gets binned.
Yeah.
So this is quite different for us, Shirley.
Yeah, I mean, I think when, I mean, maybe hopefully you'll tell us, but when you're talking about your Naikan mindfulness as well, it's that little nod, and I think that's what happened is, you know, when years ago when we did do, you know, we did some work with Zero Waste Scotland, and we did the master classes and the Love Your Clothes, and people were interested in repair, but equally they were saying, well, time I buy needles, time I buy thread, I can just get I could get another top, I could get another one at Primark, super
Yeah,
easy, super cheap.
yeah,
But then, you know, then where does that take us? And that's where it's kind of got us now, isn't it? And it doesn't last. And I think also that is something in this honouring the material and honouring the repair. I think that's really important. Like I think you know, the fact that I'm taking time because I want to repair this garment, or I want to do this to stitching because I want to keep it, you know, I like it and I want to keep it. And I think this using things and this throwing things away is not the way forward. And I think now with everything that's happened, and I think with people being able, like if you wanted this to be perfect, you could machine it. But
mhm,
I don't want to get a sewing machine out. I don't want the noise. I just want a sort of quiet place to do this. And I want it to, and I've got complete control as to where I put this pattern as well. It's wherever I decide I'm going to start stitching, and I
yeah,
can pick it up and put it down. And I speak about my mum a lot in my work because she was a great maker. She was always making things, very rarely finished them, and they were always had a little something not quite right, or a little extra stitch, or another little extra bit. And actually, I think that made it more unique. And I think in my own work, it's done by hand. So that's one of my things, that there's no ever two pieces the same. And I think that makes it more special. The fact that it is unique, and it is that nod to imperfection.
yeah. And the fact that it embraces imperfection liberates those of us who cannot do invisible mending,
Yeah,
who
yeah,
feel bad, oh no, I can't do this properly. But if actually imperfection is proper, then we can all do Sashiko because,
yeah,
no.
absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I think that's really interesting, and I did some research before, and I did it with Anne Harrod from Nottingham Trent, and we did this academic research paper, and we were looking at, what stops people from doing repairs, and each of us were working with different groups, and I was working with this group of women who were they were like embroiderers guild, they were just incredible um, embroiderers, like so skilled. And I remembered one day one of them had got a little nick in her jumper, and I sort of said, "Oh my gosh, you can do the most." They've been doing beautiful gold work, incredible embroidery,
Mhm.
and I said, "Oh my gosh, you'll be able to do the most amazing repair." And she, oh no, she said, no, oh no. Doing repair, it reminds me of mending my husband's socks, and that was just like, oh, dreary. And absolutely not. I would just go and buy another jumper. I can afford to. And it was almost like I had insulted her by sort of, discussing this. And I think we found that the other night, that when we were talking about that, there is a stigma attached to wearing repair. So I think we've got a little bit to go on that. But I think, yeah, doing this kind of work and people actually enjoying the repair,
Mm,
that really helps, I think.
yeah. And then, the fact that the colors are blue and white, and you talked about the rocking motion and the flow, and there is that kind of rhythm, and the blue and white to me are very calming colors. So there is almost that slipping into a mindful state without even thinking about it, without, I think sometimes we get all our books on mindfulness, and we've got our mindful apps, and there's this, oh, I've got to do mindfulness. And
Yeah,
yet what you're showing just now is that you can just slip into a state of mindfulness through doing Sashiko.
yeah. I mean, I genuinely really, really believe that.
Mm,
And quite often, like I know I've been doing more, using technology more than I've ever done in my life, but I quite often, if it's in a meeting that I'm not hands on, I will have some stitching, to be doing alongside, because I do something, it just calms me down. It
yeah.
keeps me grounded again.
And do you think it calms you down enough to concentrate in the meeting then? Is that why you would do it within a meeting?
Absolutely, I think I actually listen better,
Right.
and I think that's. I mean, hopefully that's kind of maybe a wee bit what we're doing just now, like
Mm,
we said, we wanted to get to this state where it was a kind of, it's not really about us, it's just about sort of talking about issues, but we're doing it in a very, safe and, and relaxed way,
yeah.
which I like.
Wouldn't that be interesting if you had like a bank, some executive meeting, and you said, right, everyone stitching out first,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
like the stress balls, all that sort of thing.
yeah.
It's, yeah.
Well, I'm going to try and do a little bit more of this, and I did do it at a conference, one of the big plate conferences in 2019, I think it was, and I got the participants to come, and and I was talking about hand stitching and keeping things that way,
Mhm.
I gave them all. I work with a lot of wool, so I gave them some wool, and we started to and I made them all kind of think of somebody and think of something they wanted to make, and they started to stitch, and I presented the paper. I certainly enjoyed presenting the paper a lot more than I would if I had had to stand up with with a projector, with a PowerPoint, and
Yeah,
just be quite. So I'm definitely going to go and look at that a little bit more, because I definitely enjoy presenting, not seeing my face,
yeah.
and I certainly enjoy doing this. I'm more relaxed, I think.
Yeah, and I think I mentioned, maybe I didn't actually on Wednesday, but Nikki, the national coordinator for Fashion Revolution Scotland, she's done work with remote youth
Yeah.
and doing sewing classes with teenagers. And she commented on the fact that you can't hold a mobile phone and stitch.
Yep.
So without even saying put your phone away, by actually committing to doing any kind of sewing, you're
Yeah.
immediately
Yeah.
saying, okay, I'm not going to look at my phone. And Nikki talked about um, these young people singing and chatting to each other,
Yeah.
and that real positive aspect of mental health just by sewing.
Yeah. I've seen it before, and I
Mhm.
did some work with some young mums with a group, and again they were very agitated when they came in.
Mhm.
They'd actually been drinking those power drinks as well, so they were quite hyper,
Yeah,
and then their phones were going all the time, and they were like, oh, they were agitated, and again we said, look, um, I was just getting them to do little shapes and running stitch to begin with. And I said, and they were cross, they were angry that they had to put their phones away, but
Mhm.
it didn't take that long, it didn't take that long. And there's this lovely thing, and they were all like talking over each other and talking and agitated. And then you get that lovely kind of calm happens, and it's just quiet. And it is literally, and I know this is cheesy, but it's just like you could hear a pin drop. You know?
I like that, Shirley. Well done.
Yeah. Look, Karen, you've got to tell us about Naikan because I just really loved hearing it the other night, and I know people will want to hear it. Please.
Oh, well, thank you. Yeah, I'm not an expert in mindfulness or Naikan at all, so that's my disclaimer at the beginning. But because I'm interested in it, I thought, as I said at the beginning, actually, I'm going to teach this so that I learn more about mindfulness. And then I heard about Naikan from a friend, and he's a very calming influence. He's a really good laugh as well. It's not just that he's some sort of Zen-like monk. He makes everyone laugh, but he's got a very peaceful approach to life. And he was saying that he was completing this master's in Naikan, so I thought, oh, that's interesting. So mindfulness in general isn't a thing. It's lots of practices. So what you've been describing just now, Shirley, and Sashiko is a form of mindfulness. And I think that's something that we perhaps in our culture don't really appreciate. We kind of think, oh, I have to learn to do it and it's a thing. But actually it's lots of things. I've put a film on, well, actually I couldn't put it on the Fashion Revolution YouTube channel because it didn't do audio. So I've put it on my website, which is elements.ltd. And in the well-being, I've got some audio files, and they're very amateurish, so don't expect anything too great. But I put mindfulness with our clothes. So as we remove our clothes in the evening, to have a kind of gratitude journal simply by undressing, and by with every garment to think about the earth's resources that were used to grow the cotton or whatever material has been harvested to create the textiles, and the people who created the clothes that we're wearing, to be grateful for those people, to be grateful for the the time that they gave to us, the time that they gave to our clothes. And then to be at the same time considering, was that person paid a fair wage? Was that person working in good conditions? And to do that for each garment, and then to finish off with ourselves, to be grateful to ourselves uh, for the clothes that we're wearing, and to be kind to our bodies, not to judge our bodies, but to be grateful for the fact that our feet carried us for another day, or that any aspect of our bodies, that our bottoms, are padded enough that it wasn't painful to sit while we did the Zoom. Not to judge our bodies and to say, oh, it's not fit enough or it's not thin enough or whatever, but to actually take a mindful moment during that process of undressing to be grateful. And that's a way of being mindful without having to sit and think, all right, I've got to meditate, I've got to be mindful. So that just came to mind. But the Naikan is reflecting plus plus. So it's reflecting on significant people in our lives. And there's three things to think about. What have we received from people in our lives? What have we given to those people in our lives? And the last one's a bit of a strange one, but what troubles or difficulties have we caused those people in our lives? And the people in our lives can be the person who served our coffee. So if we buy a coffee, it can be that person gave us that coffee with a smile, and gently placed that coffee in front of us and didn't slam it down, but actually gave it to us, and maybe gave us a word of greeting, or asked about our day, or wished us a good day. That there's so much that person has given to us simply in handing a coffee to us. And so with Naikan, it's about slowing our lives down, slowing our way of thinking down enough to appreciate every aspect of what that person has given to us, and not just to grab a coffee and not go through that process. And then what have we given to that person, but also what troubles or difficulties. And on Wednesday we considered that almost seems like a negative thing. What we don't want to berate ourselves, we don't want to put ourselves down. But if we considered what troubles have we caused, so if we take it back to the mindful clothing of taking a garment off and thinking, who made this, who made my clothes for me, then if we actually think, what trouble have I caused the person who made my clothes, we might start to think, do you know what? I don't need to go to the high street and use a retailer who doesn't pay the person who made my clothes a fair wage. I could be doing this differently. So considering things that we can improve on, reflecting on those things can then help us to be better people. Whereas if we don't think of the negatives, which, you know, our culture is really, you know, my kids at school, they were given a sticker for turning up. Do you know, it was like, we're so positive now about everything
Yeah.
that perhaps we don't learn as much because we don't consider the negatives as well. So Naikan goes into that as well. That was a whistle stop tour, but I'm
Yeah.
intrigued by what you're doing just now, Shirley. I'm loving the colours.
Oh yeah, because I suddenly, I mean, that's really, as you're talking, I'm just sort of listening because I really like that approach rather than, you know, the blame approach. And so I
Mm,
think the reflection is, it's not accusing,
mm,
it's just reflecting, and I find that really inspiring. So, and also I think, you know, and it is just that, like thinking about yourself, thinking about and not judging. I think that, and I think that's the, I suppose that's what I so much like about the, you know, the wabi sabi, that imperfection is not
yeah.
judgmental. It's just, you know, this is what I've done to repair it.
Mhm.
Um, I just forgot the other night. I did bring this out because this is like a lovely
Yeah.
silk dress that the seams were getting stressed. I was saying, and I'm not going to judge myself and say I've eaten too much, but the seams were getting a little bit stressed.
Right.
So I thought I would repair them. But and what I did is exactly the same as what I was showing you earlier. But this is the back of it. This is the, it's the same. It's another old bit of silk that I had. So
Uh-huh.
I'm just kind of stitching this silk onto this silk, and I will trim away the edges, and I might even finish the little edges a bit. But it's really good because this seam was, you know, like the silk, it is quite delicate
Yeah.
and it's getting pulled, and now this is quite strong now. So I'm quite happy that this. Hopefully, I'll get to wear this again quite soon.
Yeah.
So that was like, obviously, I think, you know, as much as I love the blue and white, I think you can apply this. And we sort of spoke about it as well. Like I picked a color. I mean, this is going to be. I mean, I can see it's a repair, but it's not going to be like as obvious, perhaps, as the, you know, as the blue and white,
Yeah.
but it's still the same technique, that repetitive, you know.
Mhm.
And I've just been doing that since you were talking, and you can see how naturally, like I'm trying to be mindful, I'm trying to make these the same, but actually it's like handwriting. I've got
Yeah.
this space happening,
Yeah.
and that's me, that's my stitching, so I'm
Yeah.
okay with that, you know.
I love that because you said on Wednesday about you could give each of us the same thread, the same material, the
Yeah,
same needles,
yeah.
but it would be different stitching because of us.
Yeah, yeah. It's like tension, just the tension that we would
Right.
have. And then I think we just kind of finished up on Wednesday, and I was just saying because it was the workshop was inspired Sashiko stitching, and I was sort of saying these little stitches here I use in my work, and they've got a little space in the middle traditionally, but I filled it for my
Right.
own work, and I always map things out. Like I map out, you can see it's that running stitch, and then I just build it up by putting things at the side. And all of these stitches are very simple to do, but they are just that stitching again, and I, you know, I can lose hours, just, you know, suddenly I look up and, you know, 2 hours have passed and I'm
Mhm.
still stitching away. So I think it's a little bit of everything, but I certainly think it's inspired by Sashiko repair, Sashiko stitching, and just that embellishment of material.
It's beautiful.
So I think that's probably we're nearly there, aren't we, with what
Yeah.
we've just blethered on. We said half an hour and we've gone over. But yeah, another little delightful afternoon.
Yeah. Now, Shirley, tell me, are you going to make classes for us? Like, we want to come and learn more.
Well, do you know, we need to talk afterwards because I want the mindfulness to be talking and the stitching. I don't want one without the other. That's how I'm reading it.
Yeah.
And the feedback we got from the other night, people said how they'd enjoyed your voice. And I know you said we can go on your website and listen, but it's your voice, I think, because I get a bit excited and that can be agitating. But I think your voice is very calming, and I think the stitching. So yeah, we should. I'll put it out there, and I know people
Yeah.
left emails the other night, so I'll get hold of those, and I think we should hatch a wee plan and see where we go with this. It's exciting.
Yeah. Thank you so much. And thank you
Thank you.
for being kind and generous enough with your time to come back and make a film after my faux pas. I appreciate
Oh,
that.
no problem. Thank you.
Thank you. Take care. Have a
You
great
too.
weekend, Shirley. Bye.
Okay. Bye bye.
Bye.